All right, welcome everybody. Tonight, Mama G's Lifestyle is bringing to you live clinical social worker and therapist Steve Moody. He practices in Irvine, California. He specializes in relational therapy, and his focus is on the relational dynamics at play at home, the workplace, school, and personal life that contribute to our mental health concerns and emotional well-being. He is also a public speaker and has given a number of presentations on relevant topics such as love, perfectionism, narcissism, relationships with addiction. And tonight we are bringing you a little webinar titled The Fear of Failure and What We Can Do About It. Fear of failure is a commonplace in many of our lives today. If we don't follow through, finish the task, lose the weight, accomplish the goal, get the promotion, we oftentimes feel like a failure. This can lead to feeling bad about ourselves and even thinking that we are not good enough. In this webinar, we will discuss the ways in which we view failure. We will look through the lens of both internal failure and task failure. We will discuss the concepts of failing forward, and we will learn how we can grow from failure. And most importantly, we will explore getting to a place where we can accept our own acceptability and therefore view failure very differently. So I've known Steve for quite some time. I was telling Steve that the majority of my clients, when they fill out their initial application, when they're going to join me as a client, they often cite fear of failure as their biggest concern. Fear of starting something new, fear of what this is going to be like, fear of a lifestyle shift, fear of new food, who knows what it looks like. So as we're going on, feel free to type in the chat bar any things that might come up for you, any questions, comments. We'll go over those at the end with a little Q&A perhaps, but if you have it on your mind, go ahead and put it in the chat bar and I'll monitor that, but we will let Steve get going here. So I will get myself out of here. And thank you, Steve, for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate Gina reaching out to me to talk about things that are near and dear to my heart, and talking about emotions and feelings and why we feel the things we do. And failure essentially is one of those things that I wanted to discuss and talk about today. So, and the fear of failure, because it's this big scary thing sometimes. So I want to kind of look at what we can do about it when it comes up in our lives. So first of all, I just kind of want you guys all to think about where your fear comes from. Like your idea of fear, where did that first come from when we're young, right? So when we're young, we experience failure and mistakes. And then the relationships that we have with people, they kind of shape our idea of failure and how we view ourselves and how we view ourselves with regard to failure. So I want you to think about relationships with parents that you have and what that dynamic looked like when you failed. What did they do? What did your siblings say to you when you failed? What did your friends say to you when you failed? What did mean kids at school say to you when you failed? Because typically, our current idea of failure oftentimes is attached to an old way of thinking. So I wanted to introduce to you kind of a concept of, it's called scripts. And so we have these childhood scripts, and then we also have these adult scripts. So childhood scripts, I want you to think about them in a way in which, so when you're young, you're trying to make sense of the world. And so what happens here is something happens to you, and then you write a script about what happened to you, and that's kind of how you live by that script. So positive things could happen to you. You could have a really good experience, and someone gives you praise for it. And so the script that you write is, hey, when I do this, I get praise. So I'm going to continue to do that, right? But we also have negative childhood scripts that come up, and this can also contribute to how we typically view failure. So think about when a child is young and they bring home an A, their parents praise them. If they bring home a B and the question is, why isn't this an A? That child then goes into a place of, oh, okay, well, if I don't bring home A's, my parents are disappointed in me. And so that's a script that I start living by. And so I feel like I have to bring home A's. And if I don't, I'm unacceptable. right? Which is something small, but can lead into other things, right? So if I don't perform the way I want to with my friends, I can be unacceptable. If I don't do things the right way, then I'm bad. If I'm not accepted by friends, then I'm not good enough. You know, all of these things that we kind of talk about. And I will tell you that the majority of the clients that come into my office, they are adults living by childhood scripts. And it really affects them because these ideas that they have about themselves have just continually traveled through their life. And then when they become adults, still living by childhood scripts, it's like, okay, well, my life is a mess. Like, how do I work through something like this? So as adults, if we don't, like Gina had said earlier, if we don't follow through, if we don't finish the task, if we don't lose the weight, if we don't accomplish the goal, get the promotion, we will oftentimes revert back to childhood scripts that are in place that tell us that you're not good enough. You're a failure as a person. I think something must be fundamentally wrong with you in some way. So when the question comes up of, well, what makes failing so bad? Well, because it attacks the internal core of ourself, of who we are. It makes us think that because we failed at something, that there's something fundamentally wrong with us. And so what we do is we try and prevent against failure. Everybody has this fear of failure. I can't start that because I might fail that. But I think the question that I want to pose to you guys is, does it have to, right? Does failure have to be so bad? Well, it depends on how we look at it, okay? So we have these childhood scripts that play themselves out. What we need to do is develop new scripts. And we need to develop new scripts because the childhood ones don't work anymore for us. They continuously make us feel like a failure. And because we're adults, we should essentially be living by adult scripts. So in adulthood, if my boss doesn't like my work on a project, then I'm unacceptable. That's the old script, the old childhood script playing itself out. Now, the new script that I'll have to live by is sometimes I may not do good work, but it doesn't mean that I'm unacceptable. It just means that I'm going to work on doing better, right? If I don't do things the right way, then I'm bad, right? The old script playing itself out. The new adult script is I'm not always going to do things right. And that doesn't make me bad. It just makes me human, right? If I'm not accepted by friends, then I'm not good enough, the old script. The adult script then says, I'm actually a pretty good person. And if they don't accept me, maybe I need new friends, right? So once you make these new adult scripts, then we need to start kind of practicing those, because if we don't do anything about it, the old ones just kind of play it out. And so if we have these fear of failure scripts, those ones just keep playing themselves out. Because if we continue to live by those old scripts in our life, it's really hard to get to a place of accepting our own acceptability. And this is a huge part of the thing that I help a lot of my clients get to, is a place of accepting their own acceptability. And to do that, we must, change these internal childhood scripts. And typically that takes therapy and working on, okay, well, what kind of scripts are you living by right now? And do you have this fear of failure script? And if you do, everything that you do and don't finish or complete, you're going to continuously feel like that failure. And so we have to kind of go through that and work on that in therapy. Now, I know that this goes against, so childhood scripts are things that we've been fighting for years, right? So these have been years and years and years of scripts that we have lived by, of feeling like we may not be unacceptable, okay? And, if we don't find ourselves acceptable, almost everything we do will be seen as a failure as a person. And so I want us to be able to eventually get to this point of, accepting our own acceptability is saying that even with my failures and weaknesses, I'm still acceptable. So if I don't finish the task, if I don't get the promotion, it's okay. I'm not this massive failure in my life. So if we can get to this place of accepting our own acceptability, this makes us start looking at failure differently. Okay, so I want to get into two ways looking at failure here. So there's internal failure, and then there's task failure here. Okay, so if we look at, so let's say that I start a diet, okay? And for 3 days, I do fantastic. I'm eating healthy, everything's going well. And then the 4th day, I feel like eating a ton of candy, and that's what I do. And so I binge on a bunch of candy. Now, if I go into internal failure, I am really going into the heart of who I am and saying, I'm not a good person because I can't even do a diet correctly, right? I have failed in some way to keep my commitment to doing this diet. Therefore, I am a failure as a person, and I am not good. Okay, so that's what internal failure would be. But if I am to look at it as task failure, I can say, you know what? For 3 days I did well. The 4th day I didn't do so great, and I failed at the task on that day. But I still have tomorrow, and I can still do better. Right? So if I'm looking at things as internal failure, I'm feeling awful as a person of who I am, typically related to our old scripts. But if I'm writing those new scripts and feeling okay with myself and my acceptability, I can look at it as a task failure and say, you know what? I messed up today, but I can get back on board tomorrow. Right? And so, doing these things, I'll give you some examples of internal versus task failure, right? So if I fail a test, I could say, well, I'm a failure as a person internally, and I can go into that space. Or I could say, you know what, I failed at that task, and I need to work on it for next time. So what I'm doing is I'm keeping that outside of me and not bringing it into my internal self of who I am actually, right? So if someone comes up to me and says, you're a horrible person, if I internally know that I'm not, and I feel okay with who I am, I can say, you know what, I don't really care what you say, because I already know that I'm a good person, right? Another example would be if I fail as a friend with someone, like I let someone down. I could think that I'm a horrible person internally. I should have been there for him. I should have done better. And because I didn't, maybe I shouldn't have friends. I'm too internal with that. Okay, what I should do is apologize to them and say, I'm going to try and be better next time, because there is a next time, and there always is a next time. Okay, so if I'm failing at one of my lifestyle changes, I could think, I'm not fit for this, and I'm a failure, and I've started yet another thing that I have failed at, and now I'm in this internal place of failure. Or I can say, that task was really hard, and I failed at the task, but not at the program. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep working on that program, right? I'm going to keep practicing that task. So practicing the task is really important. Okay, so I'll give you an example of Michael Jordan, right? So Michael Jordan is known for shooting the last shot and making a lot of them, right? He hits these buzzer beaters and everyone's like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. But I will tell you this, he's also missed a lot of those shots as well, right? And so what Michael Jordan does when he misses is he goes into the gym and he will take that shot over and over and over and over and over again to practice that task, right? Because he wants to try and be better at that task. So this is the work that we put in. After we've recognized it as a task failure, we can say, okay, now what work do I need to put in to improve, right? So Michael Jordan gets in the gym and practices and practices and practices. So when it comes time for him to shoot, again, this may be last shot, he feels a lot more comfortable in doing so. You'll do the same thing in things that you choose and the things that you're ready for. If someone is to put apples in front of me and a candy bar in front of me, I think, okay, well, I know I should eat the apple, but I want the candy bar, right? And if I'm not prepared and I haven't been choosing good, I haven't been practicing the task, probably going to choose that candy bar, because it's not the skinnier, more fit person that fundamentally has an easier time with it, because it's still hard. They've just been working on it for some time, and it's made the habit now that they're good at it, right? Because they practiced the task, and it's made the decision easier when the choice comes, right? So at the beginning of of your lifestyle changes, there were probably things that were really hard for you guys to do. And that now you think about it now after you guys have been practicing it, it's easy, right? In my own side, I could think, I chose TV over yoga last night, right? And now I could go internally and beat myself up about it and think that I'm a failure as a person because I didn't do my yoga, in which I feel like I should have. Or I can look at it and say, you know what? I failed that task and I need to be better, right? I'm going to try and practice more. I need to get more consistent on my yoga. Otherwise, TV is essentially going to win, right? And so, and I want you guys to think about some of these things that happen in your own life, right? So the failures that you've had, whether it be in school or whether it be in other diets that you've tried, whether it be in your marriages, whether it be as a parent, whatever it is, I want you to think about it. Do I go internal with these things? Do I beat myself up about it? Do I think I'm a failure as a person as a result of this thing? Okay, because a diet that you do or fail at shouldn't make you feel like you're a failure as a person. Okay, but oftentimes it can if we have those old scripts playing and not the new script that comes in and tells us that we're still okay, even though we failed at the diet, right? So, I've always been fascinated with the sport of baseball. It's very interesting to me because it's a game where the expectation is failure, right? 3 out of 10, if you get that, everywhere else is seen as an F and you have failed. But if you're hitting the baseball 3 times out of 10, you're getting $1 million contracts, right? So imagine if someone went and tried to play baseball with the internal failure going on, right? They would fail right out of the game because they would want to get 7 out of 10. They would want to get 7 out of 10, at least a passing grade. That's a 70, right? They would want to get 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. It's not possible, right? And so what happens to a lot of these athletes, and in working with athletes, we talk about this and saying that they fail out sometimes. But what I'd really like for them to do is, and I want you guys to be familiar with this concept, is to fail forward, okay? So if I go on this diet and don't do well, I get down on myself and I fail out of it. But if I start doing this diet and I fail at something and I say, you know what, this is something that I failed at today, but tomorrow I'm going to try and be better at it. Okay, it's the idea of failing forward versus failing out. So doing something wrong, you can go internal with it. And the next thing you know, I'm quitting what I'm doing. I fail out of something. If I'm doing something wrong and I see it as task failure and I try and become better, I'm living out this concept of failing forward. So I want you to think about Michael Jordan. I want you to think about Steve Jobs. I want you to think about Oprah Winfrey. I want you to think about Walt Disney, and I want you to think about Albert Einstein and the Beatles. And I could ask you, well, what do all these people have in common? And the first thing typically that people will say to me is, well, they're all successful. They're all great people. They're all great in their area of expertise. And I would agree with that. That is very true. But I would also say that they're also all failures at one point in their life, right? So we've heard the stories of Michael Jordan, right? He's been cut from his high school basketball team and he locked himself in his room and he cried for days. Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company. Walt Disney was told that he lacks imagination, right? Oprah Winfrey was told that she's not fit for television. The Beatles, Mecca Records, the big record label at the time, told them that they didn't like their sound and they didn't like the way that they performed. And Albert Einstein was told that he would amount to nothing by a teacher of his. And so when we look at all that, those are big failures in these people's lives, right? Michael Jordan could have quit basketball. The Beatles could have quit music, but they all decided to do something different, which was to fail forward. And when they failed forward, the Beatles recognized that there's another company out there. Oprah Winfrey said that there's another network out there. Einstein, I don't know this, but my assumption is, well, I'm going to keep working on this and maybe there's a teacher who will like that. And Walt Disney, we all know what he did, and Steve Jobs, we all know what he did. And so they all kind of took this concept of, okay, well, I'm going to fail forward with things. And so if we look at it that way, maybe failing isn't so bad. Maybe failing teaches us something, right? Because I'll tell you this, failing is a part of life. It's going to happen. If we try and stay away from it, I don't know that we can, because it's going to happen. And I'll tell this to some people who really want to stay away from failing. You know, if you're not failing, you're not trying anything new, because, you know, you're going to fail at the new things we try. There's a great quote. So Carl Jung was a psychiatrist, a well-known psychiatrist. And then Dr. Peterson is another psychiatrist or psychologist, who then quoted saying, "The willingness to be a fool is a precursor to transformation." And I really like that quote, because you could almost put in the willingness to fail as a precursor to transformation as well. But if you're not willing to be a fool and fail at something and do something wrong, it can't transform us into the people that I think we need to be, right? And so my view on failure is it makes us better. It makes us stronger. We don't need to be so scared of it. And I think it can really make us into better people in our life, right? So we have an opportunity to learn so much from our failures. But if we fail out, we give up that opportunity instead of failing forward and feeling like, oh, okay, this is something that I can do. I failed at the task. It's okay. I can continue to move forward with it, okay? So when you ask a stupid question in a meeting, right? When your voice shakes when you ask someone out, when your homemade recipe tastes awful, remember that you're one step closer to your best self, okay? So if I could, I want to kind of talk about 4 takeaways here that I want you to take away from some of the things that I've talked about. So our current idea of failure can be attached to an old way of thinking that we must work on changing. That's something that I want you to take away from the presentation today. I want you to think about your old ideas. I want you to think about your old scripts. I want you to think about, how do those scripts play out and how do they make me think about failure? I also want you guys to be able to get to the point where you can accept your own acceptability. Now that takes work, it takes practice. Sometimes it takes therapy to get to that point. But if we can get there, then it makes us view failure very different. Okay, and so the third thing I want you to take away today is try to focus on failure in relationship to task competency rather than failure in who you are as a person. This is a big distinction that I really want you guys to make and to try and work on, because when we internalize stuff, it can really spiral us. It can get us into a state of not feeling great, feeling depressed, feeling sad. And it's just not good for us. And it's also sometimes not good for the people around us. And so that practice at, okay, I want to see this as a task failure. And then once I see it as a task failure, I'm going to try and work on it. I'm going to try and become better. I'm going to try and fail forward. And so that's the last takeaway I want to kind of talk with you about, is this idea of failing forward. It's an opportunity for growth, guys. It's an opportunity to be able to say, you know what? I messed up. It's okay. I'm going to work on myself and I'm going to try and become better. I'm going to try and find that next record label. I'm going to try and find that next publisher. I'm going to try and find that next diet that is going to work for me. And so you have this big opportunity to grow here. And so, you know, these are some of the things that I wanted to talk about today. I appreciate you guys listening to me. You know, this webinar thing is a bit new to me. Typically, I'm used to talking with people with an audience and having people raise their hand and have questions and things like that. But I know we may get into a little bit of a question and answer afterward. But I appreciate the time that you've taken to listen to some of these ideas and really talk about this detrimental thing, this idea of failure that can really take us to some dark places. And in reality, if we can see it differently, if we can work on ourselves, if we can get to that place of seeing it as a task and accepting our own acceptability, I really think that we can come out of it and feel better. So I appreciate the time, and yeah, thanks for having me on. And I don't know if we're going to be maybe opening it up to some questions, Gina.
Yes, Steve, definitely want to open up to some questions. If anybody has any particulars, I just have a few thoughts that I'm going to mention myself, in the fact that so many of the people on the call today, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today, and we are recording this for others to be able to listen. But I think it's really relevant, especially in my business and where my clients are here for a lifestyle shift. And it's scary to think about behaviors that many people have had their entire lifetime revolving around food, being comfort, reward, punishment, used in so many different ways, used to sabotage ourselves and others. And I love all of your concepts. I love the fact that we can take these old scripts, right, and see, how they really do play into our opinion on failure. I think accepting our own acceptability. And when I read it at first, I didn't really understand it, but I absolutely understand it now. That concept of accepting, that I'm okay, that it's okay that maybe I chose to indulge when I had this goal of losing, weight this month. And maybe I decided to take a pause and just be able to have some treats and splurges. But it's okay to do that, especially if I've started to incorporate some more healthy lifestyle approaches on a daily basis, right? I didn't just, give in to a lifestyle that has put me in the situation I am, where I'm dealing with heart disease and stroke and diabetes and colorectal cancers and more, that are setting me up for failure, for years of disability and a shortened lifespan. I think the concept of failure in a task is so relevant to each one of us in every aspect of our life. I know for my clients, it's okay that, we had a moment, right? I always say, you make a decision to have a treat or splurge or whatever that looks like for you. And then the next meal or snack, we go right back to it. So we start to have those healthy habits ingrained in us. And then we can start to see the value of it, not only in terms of how we feel, how we look, but really this opportunity to live a long, healthy, independent, joyful life really comes from us setting up healthy habits in every aspect of our life. And the fourth thing of failing forward. And I really do love this, because every day I work with clients in terms of food choices, right? And I have a very specific template and I have beautiful recipes, but the learning curve is stiff, right? As with any technology, like you talked about with Zoom and having to deal with clientele in this capacity, a learning curve is stiff when you're learning a new food style approach and how to exercise and incorporate all of those things into the crazy busy lives we already have. But guess what? Every time you trip, right, you have an opportunity to grow. And I always tell my clients this, Steve, and I think you'd appreciate it. Instead of falling off the horse and breaking our neck, right? How about we bring the step stool over, or let me take your hand and let me help you off the horse. And you make a calculated decision about what that's going to look like for a meal or a snack or a day or a week, depending on what's going on in your life, but that we can learn from these opportunities instead of really harm ourselves for the long haul. So I think all of these aspects are paramount to our success. And so number one, in these 30 minutes, I think it was really wonderful. I would love to have any of you perhaps consider joining us in terms of questions. You can certainly type them into the chat bar, and you also can simply unmute yourself, because I think it would be relevant to perhaps talk about a scenario that Steve could help you perhaps figure out to use as a failure in perhaps a task rather than I'm going to throw in my towel. So we have a participant that asked, I always internalize and valuable to do task failure. So you want to just talk a little bit more about that, Steve, in terms of that internalizing, how terrible and bad we are compared to using that task failure. And I'm just going to say that misery does love company. And I do love the thought of what you were talking about, of all these really successful, powerful people who failed and could have made a decision to go do something else. but continue to work at it. And not that any of us need to have that type of fame at all.
Right.
I don't think any of that is part of being a healthy human, perhaps. But, you know, the fact is misery does love company, and it does help to kind of hear that, oh my gosh, Albert Einstein, you know, failed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like using these kind of big people because, you know, oftentimes we see them as successes and we don't realize what they've kind of gone through and done in their lives and failed at in their lives to kind of be where they are today. And it really kind of sends the idea of task as failing forward down the road of, oh, okay, well, that's really what I want to do. And of course, you don't have to become the creator of Disneyland by any means, but sometimes it's just in our life, making our life better and improving it and being able to fall down and get back up and say, you know what, I'm going to keep going. And so, yeah, so someone has commented and said, I always internalize, and it's valuable to do task failure. Of course, it'd be interesting to know maybe a little bit more about that, but where does that internalizing come from? Like, where did we learn it from? Was I told that, you know, because when we look back at some of maybe your old scripts, it'll tell you why you internalize, right? So if I feel like I've done something wrong and I internalize it and think I'm not a good person, really hard to keep it outside of us. This is why I think you had noted that, yeah, it's very valuable to do task failure because it can keep it outside of you. And it doesn't have to infiltrate your own kind of self. And so if you eat a candy bar, if you miss a question on a test, you're not just so internal with it. You're not so, I'm terrible, I'm awful. You're not at all. It's a task that you failed, like kind of Gina had alluded to at the end. You get back up and you work on it and you try and become better.
Yeah, I agree completely. And again, I'm going to just say out loud, people, don't miss this opportunity with Steve. We've got more time with him. Again, feel free to type in the chat bar. You're welcome to unmute yourself if you would like to have a little. Yes, go ahead.
I unmuted myself. So thank you for your presentation. It's just a pleasure to be able to listen to you today. How do you get rid of the old script though? I mean, how do you turn it off and you know, try to just put it away?
Yeah, so the old scripts are really hard to get rid of because it's been years and years and years of that old script playing itself out. And typically they're found in childhood, and so they just kind of keep following us into adulthood. But right, so we have to replace them. We have to replace it with an adult script, and then we need to practice that adult script over and over. Now, a lot of this work oftentimes is done within a therapeutic environment because those scripts are so ingrained in us, and we need to talk about really where they came from. So we'll get into talking about relationship with your parents, relationship with, see, the interesting thing is that if your parent made you feel like a failure, and then now your spouse makes you feel like a failure, they just reinforce that old script that plays over and over. And then it's really hard to kind of get away from, kind of that old script because it just keeps following us, and then it's reinforced by a spouse or a friend or whatever. So it's not, I don't mean to talk about it like it's some easy thing to do, but it is typically done with therapy and with coming up. So what I have clients do in therapy is I have them write down all their old childhood scripts. And then I'll draw, I'll have a line down the middle and I'll say, okay, well, what's the new script? What's the new one we're going to write? And so what will happen is this old script will come in and it'll be like, wait a second, I need to implement this new one because I know this old one keeps making me feel like a failure. And so I'm going to try and practice this new one. And so that's part of that task is I need to practice this over and over and over. So if I go to my family's house for the holidays, right? And I go there and my mom says something to me and it makes me feel like a failure. And I go into old script thinking I have to say, wait a second, is this the script that I want? Is this the script that's going to make me feel better about who I am? Of course not. So the new script has to be then implemented there. We can't just take away the old ones and not have anything new to put in. If we do that, then we just revert back to the old script. So long way of answering your question. It's writing out the old scripts, doing some therapy with it, and creating new scripts, and then practicing those new adult scripts.
So Susie, take advantage if you can, perhaps give Steve a particular scenario in your life or anything like that that you would like to have a little dialogue with. You might as well take advantage of it since no one else is raising their hand, and I'll just talk all day.
Okay, well, I will. Thank you. I do have an old script in mind. Both of my parents are no longer living, and the old script is that I would try it mainly with my dad. I think when I was younger, was trying to get his approval, and I would say approval and love. But I think it's more approval. So I'll give you a prime example is he didn't have boys, he had 2 girls. So he treated us like boys, and, he'd be working in the garage or working on a project and say, hey, go get me a screwdriver. And I'd go get a screwdriver and I'd sit there for 20 minutes. Is it the flathead? Is it the Phillips, the flathead, the Phillips? And I said, which one, Dad? Anyone. And then I'd bring back the flathead. And he said, no, I wanted the Phillips, and vice versa. So that's kind of sums up my relationship with my dad. And so, and then that script carries on into work and friendships and other relationships.
Yeah. Okay. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. So the script would be, if I don't do something right, I won't get the approval that I feel like I need. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you don't do something right at work, like you feel like you have to do things right, otherwise you're not going to get the approval that you want.
I think it's more of getting, it goes back to that 50-50, right? I can get the Phillips and I'm 50% right, or I could get the flathead and I'm 50% right. And so I always am stuck with these 2 scenarios, which both can be right, and I don't know what to do. And so I spend more time trying to figure it out. And then, so if I get an email, I can, at work, I say, okay, I can respond this way, or I can respond that way. And I don't know which is, it helps me. It hinders my decision making sometimes because I don't want to make the wrong choice. But my old, script says I did make the wrong choice.
Well, right. And if I make the wrong choice, I'm going to be in trouble.
Yes.
Right. As opposed to saying, if I make the wrong, so that's the old script that plays its way out. And so we can see where it's attached to. It's attached to your father. And so it's been years and years of thinking and feeling this way, right? If I don't do the right thing, I'm going to be in trouble, or I'm not going to be loved, or I'm not going to be valued, or something like that. And so that does play itself out in relationships or work or things like that, right? Where you say, well, if I don't answer this email correctly, I'm going to be in trouble. And so then it freezes me. It makes me feel just like I don't know what to do and I have to do the right thing, otherwise I'm going to be in trouble. But I would say to you that, okay, that's the old script playing its way out. But what could be a new adult way to think about that? So do you have children?
Yes.
You do. Okay. So if you see them doing that, right? Let's say that, like, what does your adult brain think is the right way to kind of go through that scenario with your child, right? Go get me a Phillips screwdriver. Could you please get me a Phillips screwdriver or a screwdriver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what should you say?
I should tell them what type of screwdriver. I should be more specific.
Okay, right. But if you're not, and they bring back a flathead, how do you respond?
Oh, just say, oh, can you get me the other one? That's the other one's what I needed. Or just, oh, thank you for this, but I wanted the other one.
Right. So even though I didn't do the right thing, it's still okay and I'm not in trouble, but I've then been asked to then go get the other screwdriver. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So your child doesn't then develop that old script, essentially according to this, right? But so as an adult, you can see it differently. And as an adult, you see it as, well, sometimes I'm going to make the wrong decision, and that's okay, because I can go back and do it the other way if that's what they need. and my life isn't over and no one's going to get mad at me or upset with me. Now, with things with work, I understand there is pressure sometimes to do the right thing, but guess what? You're not always going to do the right thing. And if you think you are, you're mistaken, and you're going to be in that space of, oh no, I don't know what I should do here, because if I do the wrong thing, then I'm going to be fired, or I'm going to be let go, or I'm going to be upset, or the other person's going to be upset with me, and all of those things. And so then this new script is now written where sometimes I'm going to make the wrong choice, and that's okay. And so then I need to practice that. So when you get an email, and there's two ways of doing it, you have to go into, this is the right way I think it is, and so I'm going to try this, and I hope it's okay. And if it's wrong, I assume that person's going to treat me like an adult and say, you know what, this isn't what we needed. We actually needed the other one. Oh, okay. I don't have to internalize it and say, oh gosh, I knew it. I'm so bad. I'm wrong. I shouldn't have done it this way. I can go the other way and saying, that's a task that I failed at. That's okay. I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to provide them for what they need. So you're looking at it differently. And I like that you were able to say how you would see it as an adult, because that's the way the adult is going to see it, or that's the way the adult should see it. So even though your dad kind of gave you this, you developed this script as a result of that relationship with him, it doesn't have to continue, because that's a childhood script and you're an adult now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, great answer, Steve. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Susie, for taking the chance there. We've got a couple more questions, but I want to just make a few comments. I think that, we can kind of make sense of fear of failure, with a young person when they haven't had as many life experiences. I can say raising my 4 kids, I can talk about a child that didn't want to go off the high dive and everybody else was going, and, just trying to coax them to go, because if you don't try it once, right, you have no idea what it's going to be like. And then if you love it, you're going to miss out on not doing it, right? We talk about trying new foods, especially with our younger children that are picky. But I will tell you that I have a cousin who, for her entire life, had 3 sisters, and always said that one of her sisters was the smart one was the pretty one, and one was the thin one. And she had this narrative in her head that really did help keep her back from being the successful person that I knew that she could be. And then I'll just mention this about a lot of my clients. I don't work with clients who necessarily have diagnosable eating disorders, but many of my clients have disordered eating, in the sense of they're used to binge eating or staying up late or having some habits that really set them up for, shall we say, failure in terms of their goal of losing weight, being a healthier person. And that kind of leads us into Patricia's question of, how do you know at what point you need additional help to accomplish a task? My 2 big challenges before entering the Mama G lifestyle program were eating sweets and staying up too late, not getting enough sleep, and then making poor food choices as a result, or being too tired to exercise. And I always tell people nothing good happens late at night, especially overeating, right? She says, I've been able to slay the sugar dragon, but not the sleep issue. And I'll just preface this by saying that my approach to a lifestyle shift has to do with every aspect of life. That's why I have you here today helping us on the psychological, emotional part of this. But we have to talk about the fitness aspect to be a healthy human. We talk about the food aspect as well. And the sleep piece, stress piece are huge aspects of it. Do you have a comment on that? And then we've got more questions. So.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that, typically you probably did before a certain way, and then you decided, you know what, I need to make a change in my life because too many sweets and not enough sleep aren't good for me. And I have to applaud you on, slaying the sugar dragon, because that's been a challenge for me as well. But being able to kind of do that, and maybe, I don't know if I could ask further questions. I don't know if you're on, or if you would like to talk about it, but seeing that those were your 2 big challenges, and being able to accomplish that one, what has that been like for you to be able to slay that sugar dragon?
Yes, I'm Patricia up here in the corner.
Hi, Patricia.
Well, I actually thought it was going to be the reverse. I thought it would be harder for me to stop eating sweets and easier for me to go to bed earlier.
Mhm.
But it's just the opposite. And so so I went on a 30-day, which Gina has all of us do, 30 days, no sugar, no alcohol. Now, alcohol was never a problem for me. But but the sugar certainly was. So I made it through the 30 days. And so I guess I could maybe follow similar steps, like do a 30 days of going to bed at 10 o'clock instead of midnight, or, I can see where, before, when I didn't have kind of a framework of steps to take and so on, I couldn't break the sugar habit either. So it was both of them. Now I'm kind of down to one. So maybe if I approach it in a similar way, I mean, I know what to eat, proper, I know not to eat sweets. I know I'm supposed to get a certain amount of sleep to be a healthy person. I'm just not doing it. And even though I've taken, like, for sleep, that was kind of my last year's project. I've got a quiet room, I've got a dark room, I've, do all these certain things, but my brain just will not let me calm down and go to sleep. So, and it's not always the computer. Sometimes I'll be reading. I mean, so it doesn't have to be the television or the computer. It can be a book, so anyway, I guess I could follow a framework. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the framework that works for you, I would always recommend this. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to go against any program or change it in any way, but if it is that framework that works for you, I would try out 30-day sleep challenge if you want, right? Going and trying to fall asleep at 10 o'clock every day and seeing how that goes. Now, if you do it for 3 days and then the 4th day you go to bed at midnight, again, don't internalize it. Don't get down on yourself. See it as a task failure and then try and return to it the next night. And so if that's something that has worked for you before, try it out, see how it goes. And with regards to the kind of what you do before you sleep, sometimes progressive relaxation, sometimes meditation, sometimes reading, sometimes, certain things are going to help us fall asleep better. You just kind of have to find what your thing is. And so if you've done meditation and it doesn't work, I'll often say, okay, we'll try progressive relaxation, because it allows you to, there's more like movement involved rather than just trying to think differently. Because if your mind is racing a lot, doing the progressive relaxation and muscle tenses and all the things that go into that can be helpful for a mind that has a hard time staying quiet at times.
And I'll just chime in here too. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Patricia,
Thank
for
you.
sharing everything. I think it's important to realize, especially what we've done in the Mama G lifestyle, is there was that in the beginning that I said, let's prove to yourself you're not a sugar addict. Let's prove to yourself you're not an alcoholic, and let's incorporate some wholesome food and see how we can start to change your palate, which is really proved that it works. Secondly, we talk very little about anything else, right? We talked about just getting into a regular walking program, nothing fancy. And so now that you have really solidified, instead of Mama G's lifestyle, Patricia's lifestyle, now is your opportunity to start to focus on the sleep aspect of it. And neither Steve or I are sleep experts, but I think in the age of COVID and with so much available out there, there are so many different techniques available, especially regarding sleep hygiene, that are paramount. I mean, I have clients who suffer from migraines and different type of things, and you do really, your body needs a certain amount of sleep, and sleep hygiene is paramount. And you set yourself up well in your bedroom, but really what's happening in those couple of hours before you go to bed is really paramount to your success. So I think that we can work on that together as well. So thank you, Patricia. Appreciate you coming in there. And then Steve, let me just read a couple more questions. We'll stay on till, I don't even know what time it is, 10 o'clock here, 7 o'clock there. Another client, Mary, said, sometimes it's difficult to recognize a pattern of behavior that leads to failure. Any thoughts on how to see these patterns? And Mary can always unmute if you'd like her to, or let you take that.
Sure. Okay. So what I would ask with that question is, what are some of the failures that you're seeing here? Because I'd like to know the failures just so we can kind of see, okay, well, what comes before those, and then maybe we can see some type of pattern.
Hi, I'm Mary.
Hi, Mary.
I don't have this set up well, so that's why I had my camera off.
That's okay.
You know, I've just been a lifelong dieter, and I think I have had successful diets in the past, but certainly in the past 3-4 years, it's just sort of been like on the back burner. And I guess it's more just behaviors that I kind of was ignoring. So it was a pattern of behaviors that just led me to, you know, and I guess that's why therapy is useful. That's why you see your patterns.
Well, right. And that's typically, and I won't get too much into it with you because I understand this isn't a therapy session, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the therapy essentially is for, is to be able to uncover and recognize some of these patterns and these, you know, maladaptive behavioral patterns that happen. And then they lead you to this failure, and it's like, oh gosh, like I wish I didn't do that, you know? And so what it would be interesting to know is get into maybe what are some of those old scripts that make you feel like a failure and where do they come from? And then are you kind of acting those things out? Are you doing things that that continue you in those childhood scripts? And if so, obviously those would need to be changed just so we can get you back to, you know, being able to accept who you are and accepting your acceptability, right? And so, you know, that's something that, yeah, therapy would be helpful for. And typically therapy is there to recognize those patterns. Yeah.
Well, that led into a great question. Thank you, Mary, for that. Of someone who said, after losing a lot of weight and all the attention is always on me, I think I am subconsciously trying to fail because everybody is watching me, or am I doing that? I guess that's the question. After losing so much weight and all the attention is on me, do I subconsciously want to fail because everyone is watching me? So this particular client has had tremendous success, has struggled with her weight her entire life, and has you know, a few times lost significant amounts of weight. And we really did feel like this time was different because she really changed her approach with her food, enjoying beautiful food, having a beautiful lifestyle with exercise and with her family and such. And she's still finding herself with stress and work and all of those things to make it an excuse now. And so I never broached this with her. What do you think? Do you think it's subconsciously something that she's doing because of the attention being on her?
It certainly could be. I mean, I think I would have to talk with her more, maybe get more information before we just jump to this is a subconscious thing happening to you. But what I'd like for this person is for them to be able to get to a point where it doesn't matter what these external people are saying and thinking about them. And this is where it gets into being able to accept my own acceptability. Because if I can do that, it doesn't matter who's watching me or not. It doesn't matter who's saying, oh, you're losing weight or you're not losing weight. What matters is the decision that I make. Do I think I'm more healthy? Do I think I'm losing weight? Do I think I'm looking good? And if the answer is yes to those things, then it doesn't matter what these external people really think about us, because I've already accepted my own acceptability and know that I'm good, even regardless if I lose this weight, or even regardless if I, you know, aren't that person who I said I was going to be, right? And so,
Hi, Steve.
I don't know.
This is Marianne.
Hi, Marianne.
I'm the person answering the asking
Okay,
the
good.
question, and yes, I've lost over 100 pounds, probably, I don't know, 5, 6 times in my life, and always have gained it back. And this time, I know I have the tools. I know that Gina literally has taught us how to eat, which any other diet I did, then, it never really taught you the healthy way of doing it. So yes, I've succeeded. Yeah. I have a very strong mind. If I put my mind to it, I will succeed and I will do it. So losing the weight's not the issue for me. It's keeping it off. And somehow I think, I'm struggling right now. And I am eating out of stress, emotional, or just eating, and not for any reason, not for being hungry, but just doing it. And somehow I feel, am I doing this to myself because I want to fail? I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. Yeah, is there comfort in food for you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm from a family of 8, just to give you a background. I have 5 sisters, and out of the 8, I'm the only one that had the weight problem. And so, had 6 beautiful skinny sisters, or 5, and so I always felt like a failure, throughout my life. I mean, I was athletic. I was athlete of the year 2 years in a row. I made being overweight. I mean, so I was well driven that way. But somehow I just don't know what I don't know. I just wonder if I am subconsciously doing this to myself. Do I like the way I feel now? Yes. Do I feel a hell of a lot better? Yes. My diabetes is gone, although now that I've gained back 20 pounds just from stress eating, and over the last couple months, and I feel so guilty every time I eat something that I shouldn't. So I don't know. I mean, I just wonder if I am doing this to myself subconsciously.
Yeah. Okay. Do you feel like, because it seems as though from what you said about childhood is that there's probably a lot of childhood scripts running through those veins. Would that be okay to say?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Being the standout one, and kind of always being looked at as the fat child out of 8 kids.
Yeah.
So
right.
Yeah, probably.
It's almost like the role that they gave you. Yeah.
Pardon me?
I said it's almost like the role that they gave you, whether you wanted it or not.
Yeah, and you just brought that out on me, because I've never thought about that before. And so yeah,
so what will happen? Yeah, what will happen is those old scripts, those will do a number on us. And those will make us go up and down in our feeling about ourselves. And again, getting to that point of, this is why I had started this with, if you can accept your own acceptability, it doesn't matter what they think. But I don't know that you had that opportunity, because you were always being told that you weren't as good, you weren't as thin, you're not as fit, and all these things, which make you feel like a failure in and of itself.
Yeah,
right?
I went
and
to
so
a doctor.
It's almost like it.
My father was a doctor, and they took me to a doctor to lose weight when I was probably, I don't know, 13 years old. And I went in for the checkup, and it's going to make me start crying. And I still hold this. And I gained 2 pounds, and the doctor screamed and yelled at me and told me never to come back again until I lost the weight.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a challenging script that just will plague you as an adolescent and even into adulthood. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that experience, because it just really puts us in a state that just makes us feel terrible about who we are. And that's not what we want.
Yeah, exactly. And I know, I can't afford to gain this weight all back. I am I got to reset my mind, get my mind back to, okay, you can do this, get it off. You've already done it, but you got to keep it off. And that's my you know, that's my issue. And then of course, yes, everybody watching me. You know, I mean, I
Yeah.
had people the last time tell me, well, we'll just see how long she keeps it off. And I gained it back.
Mhm.
And so it's like, you know, all that stuff in the back of my head that's just saying it's all negativity that I hang on to, I guess.
Yeah. Mary Ann, thank you so much for sharing that. Really proud of you for being vulnerable, because I can imagine so many people have pieces of this that they feel the same way for. And it is, we are on the hour. So Mary Ann's not alone. This is the scenario that I see from so many of my clients who have had a lifetime of struggles based on narratives that were handed to them, not that they necessarily made for themselves. How would you like to end this webinar in terms of where do these people go next? I mean, my clients, regardless of their scenario, have been given the tools and they really do love their new lifestyle. But sometimes we have a small segment of our clients who just have a lot of struggles, you know, from a lifetime, or perhaps just obstacles that they've endured later in life that are going to get in their way of treating themselves respectfully and continuing on this lifestyle shift. What do you think? Where's the next step for them? And then I'll give you a thank you and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, if people are in a state of mind where, and essentially going up and down with weight and dealing with those issues, typically there probably is some psychological stuff going on. And so what I would do is I would recommend maybe some therapy to work through some of those issues, to work through some of those old scripts that continually plague them in their, you know, in their ways of losing weight. And so if they lose all the weight, then they feel great about themselves. If they gain it back, then they hate themselves. That's as a direct result of an old script that plays itself out. And so being able to kind of work through that and be able to get to a place of saying, you know what, I'm good if I lose it and I'm good if I gain it. And I'm okay, but I'm still working on myself. I'm trying to improve still. And so some of it is program, some of it is psychological work, therapy work, and then getting to that place where you accept yourself for who you are, which is where I'd love people to get to. And that's why I love doing what I do, is getting them back to that place of just being acceptable again. It's not up to your parents. It's not up to your friends. It's not up to your spouse, whether or not you're acceptable. It's up to you. And that's what I'd love to leave you guys with.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. Really appreciate it. Obviously, I'm a big fan of therapy. I utilize therapy throughout my life through different life's obstacles, and I do promote therapy with all of my clients when necessary. It's not something that you have to have every single week of your life, but when you are struggling, right, it is a good time to go to the therapist like you would go to the doctor if there was a situation that needed to be rectified when you're not capable of doing it on your own. So advocating for your mental health as well as your physical health are paramount. And that is why I wanted to bring Steve out to share his wise words and give you guys some tools, and really appreciate it, Steve. I did put Steve's information in the chat bar. We will have this recording available to you. So be happy to share it with anybody you like. And Mary said, thank you, uplifting words and ideas. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful evening to everybody. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for having me. I'll see you.